Acts chapter 25 from New King James Version. Now when Festus had come to the province, after 3 days, he went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. So Felix was the governor of whatever region this is. It was in Samaria, Caesarea of Samaria. I don't know what the extent of their jurisdiction was. But Festus became governor after Felix. So he's same position, just a different guy. And so after a few days, Festus goes from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief men of the Jews informed him against Paul, and they petitioned him, asking a favor against him, that he would summon Paul to Jerusalem, while they lay in ambush along the road to kill him. So I wonder if they included that. Said, will you let him go to Jerusalem? We're going to kill him along the way. I don't know if they told him that part, if Felix was aware of their desire to kill him. But Felix went out of his way to transport Paul by night to a safe location when he found out about the plot to kill Paul. And now Festus is getting an opportunity to collude with the Jews to kill Paul. Verse 4, but Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself was going there shortly. So Festus is in Jerusalem talking to the Jews, and he says Paul's going to stay in Caesarea, and I'm going there too pretty soon. Therefore, he said, let those who have authority among you go down with me and accuse this man to see if there is any fault in him. So he's saying, when I go back home to Caesarea, where Paul is a prisoner, you can bring some of your high authority Jews along, and we'll figure out if we can find any guilt in Paul. And when he had remained among them more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea. Down just meaning going down the hill. Caesarea is actually kind of northwest of Jerusalem, on the coast. And the next day, after they got to Caesarea, sitting on the judgment seat, he commanded Paul to be brought. When Paul had come, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood about and laid many serious complaints against Paul, which they could not prove, while he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offended in anything at all. So that is a complete denial of all wrongdoing. So these Jews are coming up and giving a complete accusation of every bad thing you could imagine Paul saying or doing, and Paul says none of it's true. I haven't done anything against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against the Roman Caesar. But Festus, wanting to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me concerning these things? So, originally the Jews wanted Festus to transport Paul to Jerusalem so they could kill him. And when the Jews come to Caesarea and there's a he said, she said battle, the Jews say Paul's done everything wrong. Paul says he's done nothing wrong. Festus can't figure out what to do. So he asks his prisoner if he will go to Jerusalem to be judged, which is a ludicrous proposition, really. I mean, everybody knows if he goes to Jerusalem to be tried in the Jewish courts, then he's going to be found guilty because they are biased. Sounds a lot like what's going on today and now in the present in America with Donald Trump and the Democrats. The Democrats are the Jews that are just will stop at nothing to accuse him of every wrongdoing that he could possibly think of, and when he really hasn't even done anything. It's just a pure bias. So it's not hard to imagine the hatred that the Jews had for Paul, because you see the same thing with the Democrats hating Donald Trump. for no reason. So Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. So he's a Roman prisoner. He's not a Jewish prisoner. He's not a prisoner to the Jews. He's a prisoner to the Romans. The Romans have captured him, actually, to protect him from the Jews, really, and to prevent riots and things like that. And Paul says, I should be judged in a Roman court, not a Jewish court. He said, I ought to be judged in a Roman court. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you very well know. For if I am an offender, or have committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying. But if there is nothing in these things of which these men accuse me, no one can deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar. So I don't really see this as Paul being afraid to die, because I mean he said he's willing to die. He said he was willing to die before he came to Jerusalem. I see he's just fighting for justice, for what is right. He's not going to just roll over and let somebody kill him just because he's willing to die. But he appeals, and I think rightly so. I mean, obviously, I think anybody would. When you know that the Jews just want to kill him and destroy him in whatever way they can, and even in an unjust trial, they would simply vote conviction based on their bias and absolutely not be concerned for facts or evidence. So who would want to be tried in a court like that? So of course it's right for Paul to appeal to Caesar. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, You have appealed to Caesar you shall go. So that was really his Roman obligation. He's a Roman official, and when somebody appeals to Caesar, and who is a Roman citizen even, Paul being a Roman citizen, being a Roman prisoner, appeals to Caesar, then this guy has no other option but to send him to Caesar. And after some days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea to greet Festus. Now, I think this King Agrippa was a Jew. I think he's Herod. I thought the Herods. Well, let me verify this. So it is a little bit of a complicated issue. I think he was considered king of the Jews. I don't know how the Herods became kings of the Jews. I want to say it has some roots in the actual Israel kingdom that started with Saul and David and Solomon, and then the divided kingdom, and then maybe this is like the remnants of that trickling over. Now, the Herod, it says he was raised as a Jew. He was a Jew in religion, but this particular guy actually sent 2,000 men, archers, cavalry, to support Caesar Vespasian, or maybe he wasn't Caesar at the time, but he, indicating that although he was a Jew, his loyalties lie more with the Caesar and with the Roman Empire, because that's really where he got his power and authority from. So the only way for him to maintain any authority or power was by supporting the Roman Empire. So really he was a self-seeking person, but I don't know the details of. So if you know anything about the origin of the Herods, and I could certainly research it some more, but is this the remnants of what began with Saul and David and Solomon? Were these guys the king of the Jews? The Jewish king? I kind of think they were. But anyway, so this King Agrippa and Bernice. Now, something I just looked at said that Bernice is his sister, not his wife. But King Agrippa and Bernice, his sister, came to Caesarea to greet Festus. Now, why would he greet Festus? Why would he go greet the Roman governor? It's because he was trying to maintain good graces with the Roman authorities to make sure that he can maintain his high position as some type of king of the Jews. When they had been there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, "There is a certain man left a prisoner by Felix, about whom the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me when I was in Jerusalem, asking for judgment against him. To them I answered, it is not the custom of the Romans to deliver any man to destruction before the accused meets the accusers face to face, and has opportunity to answer for himself concerning the charge against him." So the Jews wanted Festus to just send Paul to Jerusalem, but Festus says, well, the custom is that we have a trial and he meets his accusers face to face. So that's why Festus invited the Jews to come to Caesarea. So because of this custom of, having some type of trial where both sides are in the same place making their case. Therefore, when they had come together without any delay, the next day I sat on judgment seat and commanded the man Paul, to be brought in. When the accusers stood up, they brought no accusation against him of such things as I supposed, but had some questions against him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who had died, but Paul affirmed to be alive. So again, Festus says, I didn't care anything about what they were arguing about. They were arguing about the Jewish religion and about whether Jesus was dead or alive, and had nothing to do with anything that any Roman official would care about. And because I was uncertain of such questions regarding the Jewish faith or whether Jesus was alive or dead, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there be judged concerning these matters. So he says, since this is all about whether you violated the Jewish law, why don't you go to Jerusalem and just be tried concerning your faith and your own law? So that is a reasonable thing if you could have a fair trial in Jerusalem. But the issue is you can't have a fair trial in Jerusalem because the Jews are going to kill him no matter what. But it's reasonable if you could expect any type of fair trial. So, it's all concerning whether or not you violated the Jewish law. So go be judged in Jerusalem about Jewish law, because I don't care about those things. But when Paul appealed to be reserved for the decision of Augustus, now that tells us which Caesar, or who was Caesar at the time. No, something is not right here, because Augustus was really the first Roman emperor, and his reign was from 27 BC to AD 14. So the timeline is not right. I don't believe Augustus was Caesar at this time. Maybe since Julius Caesar was technically kind of the first Caesar, but since Julius Caesar, I guess there was still the Roman Senate that helped govern Rome then he's not technically called an emperor. But Augustus he dissolved the Senate, which is what made him an emperor. And Augustus was the nephew of Julius Caesar. Grandnephew is what it says. So, since Augustus was the first Caesar, I think that's why Felix says Paul appealed to be reserved for the decision of Augustus, which means under the authority of the emperor. So the timeline's not right for this to be. But since Augustus reigned until 14 AD, well, that's before Jesus died, around 30 AD. So there's no way Augustus is Caesar at this point in history. Now, let's see who I think it was. Well, it could have been, because I don't know exactly what year this was, but it was either Caligula, Claudius, Nero. Probably had to be one of those three. Caligula, Claudius, or Nero. All right. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I also would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, he said, you shall hear him. So the next day, when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great pomp, and had entered the auditorium with the commanders and prominent men of the city, at Festus's command Paul was brought in. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all the men who are here present with us, you see this man about whom the whole assembly of the Jews petitioned me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying out that he was not fit to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing deserving of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, there we go again, Augustus, that just means Caesar, but I think it means the position of emperor. And I would definitely like to hear your thoughts on Augustus mentioned in this chapter. I decided to send him. I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him. Which means he's sending a prisoner to the Caesar, but he doesn't even know what to tell in the letter, because the only thing he's even accused of is violating Jewish law. And why would Caesar be judging somebody whether or not he's violated Jewish law? He does not care. Therefore I have brought him out before you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the examination has taken place I may have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable to send a prisoner and not to specify the charges against him. All right, I had to look up this Augustus deal. So the Caesar at the time is Claudius, but his name is Tiberius Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. So even though his actual name, I believe, was Claudius, when he became emperor, it's just like the popes changed their name. For whatever reason, when they become pope, they change their name. Well, the emperor took on the surname of Augustus. So Claudius was called Caesar Augustus, but that wasn't his actual name. So the Caesar that Paul appealed to was Claudius Caesar Augustus. So it wasn't the Augustus Caesar who was the first emperor of Rome and the grandnephew of Julius Caesar. It was a few lines down from that. It was Claudius Augustus. All right, so that answers my question. I'm confident of that. So Agrippa is going to help Felix figure out what to write in the letter to send with Paul to Claudius Augustus Caesar to be tried, since he doesn't know what to say, because he can't just say he violates Jewish law. Here's a Roman prisoner who violates Jewish law. That case would be immediately dismissed, and Paul would be set free immediately. And maybe Caesar would even come back to Felix and say, "Why are you sending me cases like this? Don't waste my time." All right, so that completes Acts chapter 25. Please comment down below, subscribe, and turn on notifications.